Ferrari arrived in China with a car that looks dangerous in the corners, sharp off the line, and still somehow too weak where this season may actually be decided. That is the contradiction driving this whole weekend. Lewis Hamilton did not join Ferrari to spend the new era watching a Mercedes disappear down every straight, and Charles Leclerc did not leave Melbourne needing a reminder that pace means nothing if the battery dies before the braking zone. Ferrari knows the threat is real. The paddock knows Mercedes found something early, and now Maranello has shown up with changes that could either close this fight fast or expose a deeper problem. The warning signs were already there in Australia. George Russell put his Mercedes on top when the power-sensitive parts of the lap opened up. While Ferrari looked far more convincing once the track asked for balance and confidence through the corners. The data tells a completely different story. This was not a car getting beaten everywhere. It was a car losing the lap in the places that hurt most, where deployment, speed retention, and timing decide whether you attack or just survive. That is why Ferrari did not come to Shanghai chasing a small gain. They came trying to rewrite the part of the lap that kept slipping away. Now the story gets even bigger, because this is not just about a new rear wing or one clever setup call for one weekend. Hamilton is now sitting inside a Ferrari that can feel quick, alive, and ready to fight, yet still leaves him exposed when the battery runs dry and the straight keeps going. That is the pressure point. Ferrari believes the answer is there, buried in the way this car uses energy, saves it, and releases it. To understand why this battle suddenly feels so urgent, you have to look at the part of 2026 Formula 1 that now matters more than raw engine noise. The biggest shift in Formula 1 is hiding in plain sight because this season is no longer being ruled by the loudest power unit or the bravest late braking move. Ferrari and Mercedes are fighting over something much less visible and far more brutal. They are fighting over when the car gives power back, when it saves it, and when it suddenly runs out. That is why a lap can look strong in one part of the circuit and completely fall apart in another. The real story was never about the lap time. It was about how the lap was being built second by second before the driver even reached the next braking zone. That is what makes this new era feel so different. The electrical side of the car now plays a far bigger role in performance, which means software, battery use, and deployment timing can decide whether a driver attacks or just hangs on. A car can look planted through the corner, then lose its bite the moment the straight stretches out in front of it. Mercedes understood that earlier than the rest, and Australia gave the first clear proof. Russell was not just quick, he was quick in the parts of the lap where control of energy changed the whole shape of the run. Ferrari could still carry real speed, but it was spending too much of the lap trying to recover what Mercedes was already protecting. That is why this fight already feels bigger than one race result. Red Bull, McLaren, Williams, Alpine, every team looking at this new rule set knows the same thing now. If Mercedes has cracked the rhythm of this era first, then everybody else is already chasing a moving target. For Ferrari, the challenge is even sharper because the car has shown enough pace to make the weakness impossible to ignore. The next step is understanding exactly where Mercedes found that edge and why Ferrari lost so much of the lap where it mattered most. Mercedes did not just leave Melbourne with a win, they left with control of the story. George Russell took victory in the opening race of 2026, Kimi Antonelli made it a Mercedes 1-2, and suddenly Ferrari's weekend looked a lot more uncomfortable than the final positions first suggested. Charles Leclerc had the speed to jump Russell at the start, and Ferrari put both cars into the fight early. Which is exactly why this result hit so hard. The problem was not that Ferrari never looked quick. The problem was that the race kept revealing the same weakness at the worst possible moments. That is what Melbourne really exposed. Ferrari could attack, Ferrari could pressure, Ferrari could even make the opening phase feel alive. But Mercedes looked calmer once the race settled into its true rhythm. Russell's win was not built on one lucky call or one chaotic moment. Mercedes made the one-stop work. Antonelli stayed strong enough to lock down second, and Ferrari never turned its early threat into lasting control. What no broadcast covered is this: a car can feel sharp at the front of the lap and still lose the race in the sections that drain confidence from the driver. Ferrari had enough speed to stay close, but not enough command of the weekend to bend it their way. Now that the season has moved to Shanghai, the pressure has only grown. Russell topped the only practice session, then took sprint pole as Mercedes locked out the front row again with Antonelli beside him, which tells everyone every rival that Australia may not have been a one-weekend swing. Ferrari is still close enough to matter, but close is not the same as in control, and that difference is where this story gets much sharper, because if Melbourne revealed where Ferrari was vulnerable, the next step is finding out what Mercedes is doing better than everyone else. Mercedes is not ahead because one part of the car suddenly became magic. Mercedes is ahead because the whole package is working together in a way the rest of the grid is still trying to copy. But the Works team came into 2026 looking prepared for this rule shift, and that matters more than people think. This season rewards teams that can control the flow of power across a lap, not just unleash it in one burst. George Russell has already turned that understanding into results, first with victory in Australia and then with sprint pole in China, while Kimi Antonelli stayed right there beside him as part of a Mercedes front row lockout in both weekends. What no broadcast covered is this: Mercedes also gives us a perfect comparison tool through its customer teams. Formula One's official 2026 breakdown confirms Mercedes power units are also running in McLaren, Williams, and Alpine, yet the factory team still looks like the one using that package with the most confidence and control. That is the clue. And this is not just about hardware supply. It is about who understands when to harvest, when to hold speed, and how to keep the lap alive when others start giving time away. The data from the opening rounds keeps pointing the same way. Mercedes is not only fast, it is comfortable in a rule set that still feels awkward for others. And that is where Ferrari's challenge becomes much more serious. Beating Mercedes now means beating a system that already looks settled, while everyone else is still learning its habits. Formula One's own 2026 explanation makes clear how much more important energy recovery and controlled deployment have become, especially with the stronger MGUK and the growing role of super clipping at the end of straights. Mercedes seems to have found the rhythm of that world before anyone else. Ferrari does not need to guess that anymore. Ferrari needs to answer it, and to do that, we have to look at the part of this story that actually gives Maranello hope. Ferrari still has a reason to believe this fight can turn, because the SF26 has already shown enough speed to prove the foundation is real. In Australia, Charles Leclerc topped the first practice session and Lewis Hamilton went second, which told the paddock right away that Ferrari had not arrived with a slow car. That matters now more than ever. A team that is weak everywhere usually needs months to recover. A team that is quick in key phases but loses control over how the lap unfolds can change the story much faster. Ferrari is in the second category, and that is why this weekend feels so important. That belief did not disappear after race day either. Ferrari opened the season with a double top 4 finish, and both Leclerc and Hamilton made it clear before Shanghai that they still see enough in this package to put Mercedes under more pressure as the year develops. Leclerc has already said Mercedes looked a bit more in front than he wanted, while Hamilton spoke positively about how connected he feels to the new car and the direction Ferrari has taken with it. That combination matters. The car is giving the drivers confidence. The problem is that confidence has not yet been turned into full control once the long power phases begin, and that is why Ferrari's next move is so fascinating. This is not a team trying to rescue a flawed concept. This is a team trying to unlock the version of its own car that has already flashed at the surface. The chassis has shown enough. As the drivers have shown enough. Even the mood around Maranello before the season carried that sense of possibility. What Ferrari needs now is not a total reinvention, but the missing piece that lets all of that pace survive the parts of the lap that punish hesitation. That missing piece takes us straight to the counterattack Ferrari has brought to China. Ferrari is not waiting for this problem to fix itself. Maranello has already brought its first real answer to China, and the clearest sign is sitting right on the rear of the car. Ferrari confirmed it would run its radical flip-flop wing in the only practice session at Shanghai, putting a bold idea back on track after first showing it in Bahrain testing. Lewis Hamilton said the team worked hard to bring it sooner than planned. Which tells you this was not just another part in the pipeline. This was a response to what Melbourne exposed, and Ferrari wants that response judged immediately. But here is what the paddock is not talking about. The wing is only the part everyone can see. The real push is happening behind it, in the hours Ferrari has spent trying to understand how this car uses its speed over a full lap, and where that pace disappears when the straight opens up. Formula One reported that Ferrari left Australia in a much stronger mood than last year, with Leclerc on the podium and Hamilton close behind, which matters because teams do not rush parts to a track unless they believe the car underneath deserves that risk. Ferrari believes it is close enough to justify aggression. That is why this upgrade matters more than its shape. George Russell himself warned that Ferrari could be Mercedes' closest challenger in China, and he pointed straight at that new rear wing as a possible gain on Shanghai's long back straight. He also admitted Melbourne was closer than the result made it look, especially before Ferrari's race turned the wrong way. So this is no longer a story about whether Ferrari has pace. It is about whether Ferrari has finally found the tool that can turn that pace into pressure, which leads straight to the part of this package everyone will be watching most closely. Ferrari finally put the flip-flop wing back on the car in China, and that changed the feel of this weekend instantly. Not because one part suddenly wins a Grand Prix on its own, but because this is the first time Ferrari has shown the paddock that its answer will be aggressive, visible, boros, and impossible to ignore. Lewis Hamilton pushed for this package to arrive sooner. Ferrari confirmed it for Shanghai, and even George Russell admitted it could matter on that huge back straight. This is the part that changes everything, because the story is no longer hidden in simulation rooms and private debriefs. Now it is sitting in public view, daring the rest of the grid to respond. What makes this so powerful is not just the shape of the wing, but what it says about Ferrari's state of mind. Teams do not rush a headline part to a circuit like Shanghai unless they believe there is real time to unlock. Ferrari has already said the car looked better than the Melbourne result made it seem, and Russell's warning before the weekend made that message even louder. Mercedes still holds the early advantage, but the first serious visual challenge to that control is now wearing red. The wing has become a signal that Ferrari is ready to force this fight into the open instead of waiting for the calendar to save it. Now the tension shifts from mystery to consequence. If this rear wing gives Ferrari the straight line relief it has been missing, then Mercedes loses the comfort of knowing where the pressure will come from. If it does not, then all the attention on this package will only make the deeper weakness look even bigger. That is why everyone is staring at this part from the pit wall to the rival garages, because it carries more than speed. It carries a verdict on whether Ferrari's answer is finally arriving or whether Mercedes still owns the pace of this new era, and that takes this story straight to the championship picture. China is where this stops being an interesting upgrade story and turns into a title fight story. Ferrari has already shown enough to keep Mercedes honest, but now the question is whether that pressure can last over a full weekend instead of flashing up in short bursts. Russell's win in Australia gave Mercedes the first real grip on the season, and his sprint pole in Shanghai backed that up with fresh proof that the team still controls the pace when the lap stretches out and the field starts losing time. Ferrari does not need a miracle here. Ferrari needs a weekend that changes the balance of fear in the paddock. That is why this moment reaches far beyond one rear wing and one circuit. McLaren, Red Bull, Williams, Alpine, every team watching this start to 2026 knows the early order is not locked forever. But they also know Mercedes has been the first to make this new rule set look comfortable. Formula One's official explanation of the 2026 package makes clear why that matters so much, because the new era puts even more weight on harvesting, deployment, and how the car carries its performance through the whole lap. If Ferrari closes that gap now, the season opens up. If not, Mercedes gains time that may prove even more valuable than points. And that is the real pressure sitting over Shanghai. Ferrari has brought the bold part, the visible part, the part everyone will talk about, but the true verdict is much bigger than whether the wing looks clever in a photograph. The verdict is whether this team can finally turn promise into sustained control before Mercedes builds an early advantage that starts shaping the whole championship. One weekend will not decide the season, but one weekend can decide who spends the next phase attacking and who spends it reacting. China will tell us whether Ferrari has arrived in this fight for real, or whether Mercedes still owns the future everyone else is trying to catch.